Have you ever felt completely alone in the darkest moment of your life, only to discover that you were never truly abandoned? Tonight, I want to share a story that will challenge everything you think you know about divine intervention and the invisible forces that guard us when we need them most. This isn't just another tale of faith. This is about real moments when ordinary people encounter something extraordinary in the midst of chaos, the kind of moments that make skeptics pause and believers fall to their knees. It was March 15th, a date that would be etched into the memories of an entire coastal community forever. By 8 p.m., winds were already reaching speeds of over 120 miles per hour. The ocean had transformed into a monster, sending waves 40 feet high crashing against the shoreline of Saint Augustine Bay. Among the chaos, there was a small hospital on the edge of town. Inside, 23 patients were trapped, including 7 newborn babies in the maternity ward. The evacuation order had come too late. The roads were flooded, power lines were down, and the building's generator was beginning to fail. Nurses and doctors worked by flashlight, their hands trembling not from cold, but from fear. Dr. Sarah Mitchell faced a decision that no human being should ever have to make. The lower floors were flooding rapidly. She had minutes to move patients upstairs. But the building was old, and the upper floors might not withstand the hurricane's full force. 23 lives hung in the balance of her choice. As she stood in that hallway, water rising around her ankles, she did something she hadn't done since childhood. She prayed. Not a formal prayer, but a raw, desperate plea that came from the deepest part of her soul. "If anyone's listening," she whispered into the roaring darkness, "we need help. We need a miracle." What happened next has been documented by 17 different witnesses, all of whom gave remarkably similar accounts. At exactly 9:47 p.m., as the hurricane reached its peak intensity, a light appeared outside the hospital windows. But this wasn't lightning. This wasn't a searchlight from a rescue helicopter. Nurse James Rodriguez described it as a luminous figure, roughly human in shape but composed entirely of brilliant white light. It moved deliberately through the storm, seemingly unaffected by winds that were tearing roofs off buildings. Security camera footage captured something on tape that engineers and video analysts still cannot explain. A bright anomaly moving against the wind, positioning itself between the hospital and the worst of the storm's fury. For the next 3 hours, as the hurricane raged with unprecedented violence, the hospital remained standing. Buildings on either side were reduced to rubble. Trees that had stood for centuries were uprooted like weeds. But that small hospital, old and fragile, endured. Meteorologists would later call it impossible. Those inside described a presence, a protective force that seemed to wrap itself around the building. Some said they heard singing, though no human voice could have carried through that wind. Dr. Mitchell, standing at the window with a newborn in her arms, swears she saw wings. Massive, radiant wings that stretched across the entire building, sheltering them from the storm's wrath. When dawn finally broke and the storm passed, rescue teams arrived expecting to find tragedy. Instead, all 23 patients were alive, not a single serious injury. The hospital stood, damaged but intact, surrounded by complete devastation. Every building within a 2-block radius was destroyed, every single one except the hospital. But there was something else. On the roof of the hospital, burned into the metal as if by intense heat, was a pattern. Witnesses described it as resembling massive wings, stretched in a protective embrace. Materials experts confirmed the markings were real, created by temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees, yet nothing on the roof had caught fire. The pattern remains there to this day. Of course, not everyone accepted the supernatural explanation. Scientists proposed theories: unusual wind patterns, electromagnetic anomalies, mass hallucination triggered by extreme stress. But they couldn't explain the simultaneous testimonies from 17 independent witnesses. The security footage that 3 separate analysts confirmed had not been manipulated. The physical evidence on the roof. The statistical impossibility of that one building surviving when everything around it was annihilated. What interests me most isn't the debate about what happened. It's what happened afterward to the people who were there. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had been an atheist her entire adult life, now volunteers at homeless shelters and speaks openly about her experience. She says that night taught her we're never truly alone. Every single one of the 7 babies born that night, now teenagers, shows no signs of PTSD. Their parents describe them as unusually compassionate, as if they carry some mark of what protected them. Here's what I believe this story is really about. It's about the moments in all our lives when we face our own hurricanes. When we're overwhelmed by circumstances beyond our control. When we're standing in rising water, making impossible choices, wondering if anyone out there cares whether we survive. The angel in the storm represents something profound. The mysterious help that arrives precisely when we need it most. Maybe you call it God. Maybe you call it the universe. Maybe you call it luck. But if you've lived long enough, you've had that moment. That instant when you should have crashed, but didn't. When you were drowning and suddenly, inexplicably found yourself able to breathe. Every person watching this video right now is facing some kind of storm. Maybe it's illness, maybe it's financial disaster, maybe it's loss, maybe it's the quiet desperation of feeling like your life has no purpose. These are the real storms, the ones that don't make the weather forecast but tear through our lives with devastating force. So what's the message of the angel in the storm? I think it's this. You are seen. In your darkest hour, when you feel most alone, when the winds are howling and the waters are rising, you are not abandoned. Whether it manifests as a figure of light or a sudden opportunity or an inexplicable strength you didn't know you possessed, help exists. Protection is real. Tonight, if you're in your own storm, I want you to know, you're not watching this by accident. Maybe this message is your angel. Maybe these words are the light in your darkness, reminding you that you have the strength to endure, that you're protected even when you can't see the protection. That dawn always follows the darkest hour. If this story touched something in you, share it in the comments below. Your story might be the angel someone else needs to hear today. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that remind us we're part of something greater than ourselves. And hit that like button if you believe that we're never truly alone in the storm. Remember, the angel appears not to prevent the storm, but to shelter you through it. Your storm will end. Until then, may you feel those wings around you. Stay strong, stay faithful, and know that you are loved beyond measure.